So I'm sitting here with Colin Dunn, and you have 20 years of experience in the whiskey industry, 10 years with Diageo. Very nice to have you. A lot of experience here, and I hope to get a lot of stuff out of you about what is coming towards us. So, what are we having today?
Well, today I brought along for your delectation the new release from Talisker Distillery on the Isle of Skye on the west coast of Scotland in the Inner Hebrides. It's a pretty unique island and it's a pretty unique whiskey. When I first went there in 1989, over 29 years ago, on the opening day of the Talisker release of the 10-year-old, I stayed and had a tasting with the distillery manager, and after tasting Talisker at new make 3, 5, 7, 10 and 12, the distillery manager thought that Talisker should be drunk young, and he didn't think that Talisker aged very well. And here we are 29 years later, and we have one of the oldest, definitely from our own company, our oldest release, which is a Talisker 40.
40 years old. Okay, it's the Bodega series. Why is it called the Bodega series?
Well, at Diageo, we've got tremendous archives at Main Street. And when I say archives, it's a historical museum of records of transactions between various distilleries, and also, of course, to get whiskey, you've got to mature it in oak barrels, whether they're American or European. And we've traced through the books, going back to the 1900s, that Talisker was buying their barrels from certain bodegas in what we call the Sherry Triangle, which is San Luca de Barrameda, Jerez, and the one that I'm featuring here today from San Luca de Barrameda is what we've done is we've taken whiskey or barrels from Delgado, sourced back from the 1900s, and what we've done, we've got a Talisker that's been finished in the original casks or casks that we used over a century ago. So in a way, we're not recreating the style, we're paying homage to the past by offering to our customers a classic Talisker that's been aged in refill American oak barrels and then finished or given what we call accentuated cask enhancement of a little bit more life in Quo Vadis sherry butts from Spain. And for your delectation, to show you how this liquid is metamorphosized from its embryonic state, this is Talisker New Make.
Ooh, New Make.
And next to it, from the cradle, 40 years later, we have this new release of Talisker. So this is coming out at 50% alcohol, and there are approximately 2,000 bottles of this nectar available. And what I'd like to do at some point is to allow you or get you to taste the New Make spirit so that you can get the DNA of the distillery, which is akin or very much like chili peppers, kind of like a rock oyster lemony kind of note. In the New Make form, there's almost what I call a slight sulfury note. And if you've been to Talisker, you are aware that it's quite unusual in its setup. It is different from other distilleries. It has 2 wash stills and 3 spirit stills. And off the wash still, along the line arm, instead of the line arm just tilting down into the condensers, at Talisker we have what we call, it's almost like a U bend, an upside down U, the letter U, which means the vapors have to climb over the U bend to get to the condenser. In this case, at Talisker, it's a worm tub.
So the old-fashioned
exactly.
worm tub.
And also at the bottom of that U bend, we have a purifier, which means some of the vapors that do not climb over the U bend through reflux go back into the still and are redistilled. So it's almost like a 2.5 times distillation. So you get a sweeter note coming through on the final liquid. But on top of that, the Talisker sulfury note comes from the copper in the worm tubs. And when you taste in the new make, you find that slight sulfury note coming through. With time, that changes from that sulfury note into that chili pepper kick on the back palate, which you will get in a few moments' time. So it's a very different style. It used to be triple distilled at Talisker back until I think it was 1928. But nowadays, since it was commercially released to everyone as a single malt in 1989, the distillery has completely changed. If you imagine you have a distillery that's been making whiskey since 1830 and didn't really get its first moment until 1989. And now we have Sky and Storm and 57 North and Distillers Edition and the 10 and the 18 and the 25 and the 30. And here is the oldest expression that we've released ourselves. So it's quite unique from a unique distillery that it's got its own DNA. If it was a wine, I'd say it was an Alsace. And by that, what I mean is it's very fragrant, it's very distinctive, and it's different. I'm not saying it's better, I'm saying it's different to a lot of single malts that are out there.
Okay, so at the beginning you said the distillery manager said it was meant to be enjoyed young.
Yes.
The thing with Talisker is you rarely have a distillery that is so known for the distillery character.
Correct.
All the other distilleries, they have a lot of wood management, a lot of maturation, variation through maturation, and characterization through maturation. With Talisker, you can definitely taste, oh, this is a Talisker, this has the chili catch. Are we going to lose some of that over the years with 40 years of maturation?
Of course, it won't be the same.
So it's good.
But the art, for me, of a great whiskey is the ability to retain or keep its DNA, but taking in the extra levels that you get from wood maturation. So you were touching on something about when you taste a whiskey that's young, you are tasting often flavors that are hinting at what it may be delivering in the future. When you taste whiskey that's older, you're allowing the change from the grain talking to you to the wood talking to you. And the art, as I see it, is to be able to create a blend of the two where the grain and the wood come together to create a unique flavor expression. So ultimately, it's down to the master blender and time to be able to make a decision on when this whiskey is ready. So you can't, just because something is old doesn't make it better. You understand?
Yeah, sure.
It means it still has to perform to the expectations to the public.
The thing is, does this point really exist? I think this point is also dependent on the person who enjoys the whiskey. Some people are more into the grain or the malt, and some people are more into the wood. So probably you will have the right kind of whiskey for the right kind of person then.
Yeah, I mean,
some people like the 12-year-old, some people like the 18-year-old. So
that's human nature.
Human nature.
That's human nature. For me, people often say to me, Colin, what is your definition of a great whiskey? And my answer often is, it's like a good film, or a great play, or a great book. Each of those have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And they have balance, and they have structure. So if you take that theory and place it into whiskey, the beginning and the middle and the end is nose, mouthfeel, finish. So whether you like that taste or dislike it, it should be singing to you as fragrance, as mouthfeel, and then coming alive. That's my definition of a great whiskey, if it's scoring on all these three levels. And some people say, what is your definition of aroma? Well, aroma is all about attracting your olfactory glands to aromatics that make you feel good, that appeal to your olfactory epithelium, your nose. Mouthfeel is saying, do you want the texture or the weight of the whiskey to linger and leave its impression in your mouth? And finish, somebody once said, how long is a long finish? You can't put a time on it. You can joke about it, but ultimately, does the whiskey, after you've swallowed it, before it says goodbye, does it leave you with a little reminder that it's something special? So, like you would with a film or a play, are you left with a feeling of rapture or enjoyment, or is the end quite weak and unsatisfying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
So that's my analysis of whiskey, which is easier to find in something like the Talisker 40 than it is with the new make, because the new make is still developing.
Yeah, the thing with the new make is that it's very, very much shifted towards the malt, and
It's the grain.
it's missing the maturation.
Yes.
So the thing is, I do enjoy the idea of tasting where the spirit comes from and what the base for the whiskey is. But for me, a new make is it just misses maturation. For me, whiskey is maturation is a very, very included part in whiskey.
In my book,
You see that different?
yeah, years ago, 20 years ago,
I mean,
I was with a gentleman called Michael Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
not the singer, the whiskey writer.
Yeah, right.
And I gave him some New Make Spirit. And Michael Jackson, he loved New Make Spirit. He used to mix it in his Bloody Marys. And to show you one man or woman's perception of Talisker New Make, I remember putting this into a blind tasting of Tequila Blanco, and it came third of 12.
Okay.
So I've made margaritas with this. We don't promote this, we don't release this, but it just goes to show you that the potential for a whiskey like Talisker, for me, it's immense. If I was to say to you, in the last year, I've hosted whiskey dinners with Talisker, whiskey cocktails with Talisker. There's a great writer in America called Gary Reagan. He's written 2 or 3 great books on cocktails. And a good friend of mine, Esther Cuesta when I was hosting a whiskey and food evening with stallholders in Borough Market in London. 8 different Talisker whiskies with 8 different food pairings. One of them was going to be a Talisker cocktail, and 55 ml of Talisker 10, 45 ml of Lillet Blanc, and 5 or 6 leaves of sage clapped just to release the aromas in a highball glass with a couple of ice cubes. Gary Reagan, the great cocktail writer, he put it in his top 100 cocktails of the year. If you go to Japan, one of the most popular drinks is Mizawari. Mizawari is a term for whiskey in a highball mixed with either water or soda water. And Talisker and soda, 3 ice cubes, maybe a touch of sea salt or even a wedge of lime, is incredibly popular. So these days I'm serving up this wonderful liquid, neat, with water, with ice, with green tea, with coconut water, with ginger ale, in classic cocktails, and with food pairings drizzled over oysters, with blue cheese. But me personally, I like to drink it acoustic.
I like my stuff
Neat.
neat as well. I'm a neat guy. The thing is, most often I'm also a guy who likes to take it straight, like with no water. Depends on how much does the new make have.
63.5.
Oh yeah, that's quite something. But one last question before we have a taste. So these are the 3 sherries we tasted before.
Yes.
So how much of that are we gonna find in the whiskey? And is there any special reason, or is it just you have these casks still running around?
Well, no, we didn't have these casks running around. We actually had to go to Delgado and say, look, we found historically the connection between your bodega and our distillery, and we'd like to make this work to bring a release. We have aged Talisker, and we'd like to go back in time and use the same style of barrel, which contained the same kind of liquid as it did back then, into modern day. So these days, there's an awful lot of whiskey that's been aged in sherry casks. Without going deeply into why, which ones, and how much effect does it have. In an ideal world, on another occasion, maybe this evening, you'll be tasting the sherry, then the whiskey, where it will become a lot clearer. So this morning, you tasted the sherry. Now you're going to taste the whiskey. This evening, you're going to taste
Both of them.
the two together, and you'll get to see the message. So the ultimate aim is giving people the opportunity to look back in history at a different style of Talisker that was made back then, because European oak was what was available as a vessel to contain aquavita. As you would know, since the 1950s, American refill or American oak barrels are now huge in Scotland.
Yeah,
But back then, it was primarily from Europe, and this was what Talisker was being aged in the 1900s, which is quite extraordinary. And to be able to sample this first release from Quo Vadis, with the second one, obviously we'll be using the second bodega that we used, and so on. So this is a part of a series of 3.
Oh, it's going to be a 3.
I think so.
Okay.
Don't quote me, but I think it's going to be a 3. This is definitely the first one.
Okay. So let's go to the original.
Okay, so like anything, you start with birth. So this liquid has come off the still, and around about 60, 63, 64.5. And what I'd like you to do is just give it a little shake, and I want you to get the aroma. Do you remember I talked to you about beginning, middle and end?
Yeah.
Yeah? And to do that, we need to get your olfactory glands working. So if you take your hand away and just take a little nose, just a couple, and you're just awaking your olfactory glands. Now, at this stage, you have nothing to compare it with.
Just my remembrance.
Right, so now I'd like you to pop it back down on the table.
It's a bit smokier than I expected.
Now pick up the second. Let's give it a little swirl, warm it up. And now take a nose. And now hold this in your right hand and pick up the Numake in your left hand and go between the two. So you will notice at this stage that the Numake Spirit is firing on all cylinders with your nose, correct?
It's just...
So there's your mix of smoke and sulfur.
Rough and
it's
tough.
It's 1 second old, right?
It's definitely... it's got so much strength and intensity. But it kind of already hints a bit of the pepper.
Yeah,
but it's incredibly strong smoke for a Talisker.
Now, don't taste it for the moment. Now, just because you've just gone to that extreme.
This is so wonderfully round.
So now you've got almost like a grapey note or a sultana note, and it's much more restrained, that it can draw you in. And this, to me, is the beauty of when you are experiencing a very old whiskey, good old whiskey, you just want to nose, because in a way it's like perfume.
Oh yeah, it's
aromatic compounds mixed with grain alcohol, and the refill American oak has given it a different dimension. So it's the same whiskey, it's from the same distillery, but this is in short trousers and this is in a three-piece suit. Correct?
Shorts, yeah.
Right, it is as it is. Yeah. So
it's rough.
Incredible difference.
Rough and
I would call it fiery and young,
yeah,
and untamed.
Yeah, definitely fiery and young.
You know?
I would definitely sign that. And this is mature, elegant, round.
Totally. So I see this is Led Zeppelin or Metallica, and this is Frank Sinatra or Tony Bennett. Okay, This is rich and rounded, whereas this one is the amplifier turned up to 11. You get me? You want to taste?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, so what I'd like you to do, to give you a moment as you're on the screen, is I'm going to get you to give this a very special attention. I want you to drink it in a certain way with me. Will you do that?
Okay, sure. Always excited for something new.
Okay, so I've only poured you a very tiny drop there.
Yeah. It's a small pour.
Bit small, and this is how whiskey was drunk a long time ago, back in the day. And what I'm going to ask you to do is, I'm going to ask you to pop this little bit of liquid into your mouth, and then I want you to follow my instructions for 10 seconds.
Okay.
Okay? This will be a new experience for you, and this is going to be a moment that will be on that screen forever.
Everything's going to be
You'll be showing this to all your friends.
Okay.
So I'd like you to just follow my instructions. So
just put it in the middle, or
here we go. I'd like you to I'll just follow my. So pop this little liquid into your mouth, and I'm going to ask you to swallow it in about 10 seconds time. But I'm going to guide you through it. Okay.
Okay.
You ready?
I'm ready.
He's ready. Okay, pop the liquid in your mouth. And now, close your eyes. And now take the liquid over the tongue and around the gums and chew it, move it from side to side. Treat it almost a little bit like mouthwash. You're asking the whiskey to give up its DNA. And the whiskey's saying to you, you want me? You want me? Come and get me. So right now, please welcome the chili peppers. It's leaving itself. Now look at me, open your eyes. Look at me, swallow. And now do this. And then look at the camera.
It's definitely.
Tell them what you think.
It's intense. It's strong. It has a lot of pepper, but this time it's more on the peppery, deep, dark note. I think there's a whole lot of discussion going on pepper or chili.
You see what I mean?
This time it's definitely pepper. But almost like what you said, a little of that sulfur note.
It's a little bit briny too, but the sulfur is coming into play. In fact, the way you were enjoying it, he wanted to drink some as well. Did you see him? He was very interested. So it's left its mark.
It's definitely when you drink a 10 or an 18, a normal Talisker, and that's what I would imagine the new make to be tasting like, really rough and tough. But it's missing the maturity. It's fun to have in your mouth, but it doesn't leave you with a remembrance when you swallow it, or where you say, what was the point?
So that sulfur note that I mentioned to you subliminally, and that you've just brought up, and as you quite rightly say, the whiskey is not yet developed. Now you can understand, if you did not already, that why whiskey needs to be aged for a minimum of time, 3 years before it is released. So if you think of where Talisker is now to when I first savoured this in 89, I also asked the distillery manager at the time, what is your opinion of Talisker? And he said to me, Talisker is a bit like the weather. Some days it's great, and other days not so great. And I understood what he meant, because back in the 80s, distilleries, companies, were just discovering wood management. You understand? Nobody really knew what was the perfect cask to use. In fact, one of the main...
So back in the days, did they just take the whiskey, put it in a cask and say, yeah, it's a cask?
Yeah, often it was a barrel that was tight grained, that did not leak.
So the main thing was it didn't leak.
Yeah, I mean, if you go way back in time, everything was an experiment. People were aging whiskey in chestnut, birch, until they discovered oak was the perfect vessel.
Yeah, I thought chestnut and birch was really hard because it's not that airtight.
But it didn't give the right flavour or texture or taste to the whiskey. And it came down to Quercus alba and Quercus robur, American or European oak, that seemed to be the perfect vessel. These days, people are experimenting with Mizunara and various other.
It's an ugly tree.
To come up with some, but the bottom line is the original, or the first rule is to create a vessel that will hold a liquid without leaking.
Yeah, that was right? The purpose of the barrel.
The fact that it gave a flavour to the whiskey came secondary. Now, it's still about, and it should always be about the spirit, but the quality of cask, whether it's virgin wood, refill, first fill, second fill, third fill, rejuvenated, it's down to the coopers and the decision makers decide, let's experiment, because ultimately what we're trying to do in the industry, or every industry involved in alcohol, is to create a flavor profile that's unusual and different and liked by the general public. Mm-hmm. So Talisker is not Lagavulin, Talisker is not Caol Ila, but it's still whiskey, and it's still made from grain, and it's still aged in wood. But the bottom line is, when you start to break down whiskey on what makes it different, if you go to 6 or 7 different distilleries, particularly within Diageo, they're all different.
Yeah.
And they all have different, what I would call, cooking times, different fermentation times.
Yeah, there's so much variation. That's what I love about whiskey. You have so much complexity.
Do you see what I mean?
You think, yeah, it's got just Scotch. No, it's not just Scotch. It's a Lagavulin. It's a Talisker.
Yes,
it's definitely
yes,
different.
it's different peating levels. You know, if you are in fact going to use peat, which is most of the islands, and then you get different kinds of peat. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, when you look at the setup of 2 wash and 3 spirit, often it's 2 wash and 2 spirit that are being used, and the third spirit still is used intermittently with the other spirit still, so that there's one that's always being cleaned or kept new. So you look at the different distillation times, you look at the different wood management, you look at the different yeast strains, you look at the different barley that's coming in. The barley's coming in from Glenord maltings, which it has done since the 60s, since the big fire there. And this means that in the expressions that you have, they're all completely different. They're all singing in a slightly different way. So this expression here is an opportunity for the whiskey-loving public to try what I call liquid history. Should we give it a try?
Definitely.
Okay, so just before we do, let's just go back and just nose the new make one more time, right? So this is where it started. So 40 summers and 40 winters later.
Oh, nearly half a century.
Nearly half a century. You've got a totally different aroma. I'm getting my personal on my nose. I always believe that when you're talking about what you're getting on the nose, everyone's different. Sometimes you can come together and get the same aromatics or mouthfeel or finish. And for me, whereas if I was tasting, say, a Talisker Sky or Talisker Storm, it's almost like the smell of a bonfire that's just gone out. So here, that's quite toned down. And I'm almost getting like a milk chocolate note on the nose, a chocolatey note. And I'm going, well, this has toned down.
Definitely.
From just have another nose. This is where the fun starts.
I do get a lot of what would you call the small peaches? Mirabelles?
Mirabelle. Plums.
Jam and dried
Fruit.
Mirabelles. Dried
yeah,
fruits,
you are.
Sultanas,
so then you start
raisins.
So then you start thinking about, hang on a moment, where do they come from?
It's very oxidized.
Because they're not here.
Definitely not.
They're not here. But
yeah, we had that flavor in there as well, but
they are there.
From the nose, you definitely have a similarity to the, what was it, 30-year-old
yes.
we had. Was it Manzanilla?
And the Quo Vadis, the Amontillado. And what the gentleman from the bodega said this morning was that he couldn't believe that he could get the influence of the sherry in Talisker.
Yeah, because if you smell that, you think, no, nothing's overwhelming that.
Nothing's shaking but the leaves on the trees, you know? Right? That's pretty raw and uncut.
Yeah.
So this is with a full orchestra now. Mm-hmm. You know, this is really bringing...
But it's 40 years of time that...
It's 40 years of time in particularly the latter part of its life, in casks that were used to mature Amontillado sherry. So that nuttiness, those fruity notes on the nose are coming through. So the question is, how will that express itself on the palate and on the finish? So this is going to be a huge moment where, for the people at home, you may just have to watch two people savouring this over 30 seconds minimum. It's been sitting in our warehouses for near nigh 40 years, and it's finally made it here to Gleneagles and to your palate. So the least we can do is to give it half a minute.
I think, isn't the rule that you have to have it in your mouth 1 second for every year?
Well, the first rule is there are no rules, but I have used that in the past. Here, I think a minimum of 30. If you want to go longer, I think you can. And I do think it's important for you to be in
And now people are going to pack out their stopwatch.
I know. Are you ready out there? Are you ready? Time waits for no man. So should we give it a go?
Yeah, sure. Cheers.
Good health. Slàinte. Staying with it. Wow. So while you're enjoying the mouthfeel, you've compared the aromas, you've got the mouthfeel. It's almost like a liqueur. It's thick and rich and viscous. And now we come to, but is it going to leave its mark? Is it going to leave the Talisker classic peppery note? Or is it going to leave you with something else? So when you're still enjoying it, right? How good is that? That's a wonderful mouthfeel. Do you see what I mean about good mouthfeels? Good mouthfeels, you're actually happy. And now just breathe in some air like this.
The mouthfeel is extremely soft. It's really what you said, viscous and not
Almost
creamy,
like
but
a liqueur.
velvety. The thing is, with 50% is, I wouldn't estimate it at 50%. I would estimate it at 30 or something. And I had a slight chili catch at the very beginning, slight tingling, and when I swallowed it, you do feel that little bit of ground black pepper that just leaves there, but it's very, very, very subtle in the end.
Yeah.
And it stays a bit. It stays a bit, yeah.
The fact is, for me, the best thing is that it's after 40 years, it's still expressing itself in a slightly different way due to the cask management of these very old sherry casks. It's still alive and well, and in fact, the finish is just calming down now. The good news is because I've given it time.
I have to say, I have to agree a bit with the old distillery manager who said a Talisker has to be young. It's a very nice round whiskey, but the chili catch and the peppery note is very weak.
It's
So
less than it would be if it was an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old.
10-year-old or yeah, even 18-year-old, but it's very.
Yeah. In
it's
fact, if you go to the 18,
nice. If you really concentrate on the character that you get from there, you can slightly feel it. You do slightly feel it, but it's very much on the cask side.
It's Father Time. Father Time is. This is Talisker in a leather coat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's giving it a dressing. And I look forward to. In fact, the next time I drink this will be with a small glass of sherry, Amontillado sherry next to it. In fact, I think we might do that this evening.
Definitely.
Where we can see what the whiskey, what the
finish
sherry has done. I think you should. I'm going to save mine and give this to a good friend who's been waiting patiently. So the bottom line is, does the whiskey, does it still sing? Yes. Is there a beginning and a middle and an end? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Has the new make turned into something different? Yes. So when was this actually distilled? So you look at 1978. So in 1978, the spirit's gone in the cask in a refill American oak hogshead, and like this in 1978, not knowing when it would be emptied and put into a bottle.
At the very bottom, at the very far dunnage.
And 40 years later, it's had it. Yeah, doesn't that see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
the thing is, what I find interesting is Talisker is not known for their extreme peatiness, but I still do get a whiff of smoke in there.
there is.
There is a little.
That's
whiff
what
of
gives
smoke
it
in
the
there.
edge. That's what you need, you know. I have tasted, without mentioning any names of other distilleries, I have tasted, you know, peaty whiskies, young peated whiskies from other distilleries, and I've tried them at 30, 40 years later, and it's disappeared.
Yeah, that
Time is taken away. It's a bit like saying, myself, when I was 18, I had a hair down to here. I was
Where's
Robert
it gone?
Plant, you know. 40 years later, boom. So it's still alive, but it's different.
it's. After the second taste, I want to reverse my previous statement.
Yeah.
You do get, after the second taste, you in the very finish now, you do realize that there is that Talisker character in the very, very far back. So maybe it just needs to grow on you when you.
I think you've hit the spot. I really do. I'm not to agree with you, but sometimes you need to go back, as we've done here. You need to go back and try it again, and that's exactly what's happened with Talisker. Talisker has gone back in time with some of these old oak barrels containing sherry, and it shows the magic of whiskey that yes, it can play on many different levels.
This is the most black and white and night and day tastings I've ever had. 40 years, 0 years.
I know.
Yeah, I've never tasted that big of a difference. Okay.
Yeah.
So okay. So
I think to finish, my last quote is: if you have an open mind when you want to appreciate whiskey, and you allow the whiskey time, and I appreciate in this modern age, in 2018, whiskey comes in at different prices, it comes in at different strengths. Often it's the person that you're with, or the people that you're with, and how you feel. Me personally, I think this kind of whiskey should be drunk on a Monday, round about 5:30, about 6 o'clock in the evening, with the right kind of people, preferably in a nice establishment in the Scottish Highlands. And I think this is what we've got. So for me personally, it's been a real pleasure to taste this with you.
Yeah,
I'm not telling you that it's special. That's for you to decide, and for people who want to buy this. But I urge people to, if they do buy it, to open it and to share it with their friends. A moment in liquid history that we've brought back to life from over 100 years ago. And thank you for being, I think it's your round next.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving us the experience. Thank you very much for inviting us here. Thank you very much for watching. If you find this interesting, go to whiskey.de. If you live in Germany, there will be only a limited number of bottles, so be careful, check in a few times to not miss the opportunity to buy this nice Talisker 40 Years Bodega Series whiskey. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.